This is the Small Town Big Talk Show, the only place where you can listen in on real life conversations about the challenges and the joys of living in a small town. I'm your host, Rebecca Undum, and each week a guest will join me as we tackle one topic that more than likely we're all feeling or have thought about, but of course, no one wants to talk about. Let's chat. My guest on today's episode is my friend Missy Gill. She was the nestie, the very first person I ever described as a nestie in my book. And today we're chatting about what her experience has been like being a transplant. I'm a returner. I returned to my hometown. I have no idea what it feels like to be somebody that's new completely to the community. And so she shares a couple of nuggets of wisdom, frankly, about what it's like to be the transplant and how she approached that herself. She's been there almost 16 years now and is finally starting to feel less like a transplant. But we also talked about things that the rest of us, the ones that are welcoming the transplants, what we can do to make that acceptance and love for them easier. So make that transition easier for them. It's a great little chat. Can't wait to hear what you all think. Happy listening. So tell me about, I know this, but for everybody that's going to be watching this, all the people, Missy, all of them.
Right.
How big is Sundance? This was your husband's hometown, yes? So just give us a little bit of paint a little picture of what Sundance, Wyoming is.
Can I put a happy little tree in it?
Put a little happy tree over
happy
here.
Trees, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Sundance is about, I'm trying to picture the population sign. Somewhere around 1,300 people, maybe.
Okay.
A lot of times I compare it to Oaks, actually, in my mind, of what you have to offer compared to what we have to offer.
Okay.
As far as businesses and things like that. It is snaked between the Bear Lodge Mountains, which are a part of the northern Black Hills of Wyoming, basically,
Okay.
and a mountain that we call Sundance Mountain. And we just kind of stream right through those mountains.
How far are you from the biggest, how far are you from Target?
We are probably exactly 70 miles.
Oh, it's just like me. So it is just like Oaks. It's the Oaks of Wyoming.
Yeah. We are 30 miles from Spearfish, so we're about 25 miles from the South Dakota border.
Right.
And then Rapid City would be our closest target.
Okay. So 1,300 people. How long have you been back in Sundance now?
I've lived here since 2003.
Okay. Longer than me then, back in my rural place.
Yep. I moved here while my last year of college.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit about, when we were talking about all the different things we could possibly talk about, which there's plenty. In case I show a little bit of a squashing. There's so many things that squashing. So many things we could talk about. But you had said you were visiting with, is it a fellow coach? Or who was it that?
Band teacher.
Okay. Will you share a little bit about that? Because that's when you were like, let's talk about being a transplant. And I said, great, because I think this is something that absolutely needs to be talked about for other women that are transplants to their community, whether they're there because they married into it or because they just found themselves there due to a job or some other random thing, right? But when it's not your town, it's different. And I live back in my town. So this isn't an experience that I really have. So fill us in a little bit on what that conversation was and what sparked it in you to be like, we should talk about that, because I think it's noteworthy.
Well, it was interesting to me because it almost put me transplant full circle, kind of, from being the transplant to now being almost accepted as a person of Sundance, I guess, and trying to deliver this message to this new person and this new teacher in our school.
Right.
So I had, as he went through talking about the troubles he's having, I was having all the light bulbs and the ding, 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 oh my gosh, I went through that. I remember that, this is what you need to do. It's not how I did it, and it's not what I'd probably do, but it's way easier said than done. So it was easy for me to tell him what he should do.
Right.
But just basically how much small communities kind of end up, I mean, it's like chameleon, I guess. Kind of everyone gets to that same color, you know, kind of rut that they're going on, and it really bucks change. And I actually am a person who doesn't love change. I kind of like things comfortable too. But you get in a small town and everybody is like that. So you get someone new in there that maybe has what they think are better, cool ideas. It's almost comes across as, I mean, people get offended and irritated that you would come in and think that their place is so horrible that it would need to change. And this guy who is trying to fill some very large shoes for this music department is experiencing some of these things basically, and saying, you know, how he has a little bit different of a method of how he teaches and how he wants to kind of change things a little more contemporary, and it's not settling well with a lot of people, and so he's losing band students and things like that.
Okay, so how are people reacting or responding? So their kids are they're pulling their kids out of band, or the kids are saying, we don't want to do this, whichever, whether it's parent-led or student-led, who knows. But what things is he experiencing? Like, what did he tell you that he feels like he's experiencing? Are people coming in and talking to him? Are they?
No. And that's the other thing, which is also very, very stereotypical of a small town, right? Yeah. Everyone's talking with each other. No one is talking to them. And I mean, I deal with that in coaching basketball too. I mean, there's so many times that I don't know about a situation until it's so blown up. And I just think, if you would have just came to me, like, respect me enough to come tell me there's an issue, and then we can work on it. But if I don't know there's a problem, how can I fix it? And that's basically what he was expressing to us as a group at this band meeting. Basically was
it a parent meeting, Missy? What? Was it a parent meeting?
It was like a band, parent board meeting type of a thing. That I mean, honestly, I didn't know this was going to be the topic, and it just ended up being the topic of this meeting. But anyway, so he was basically asking some of us if we knew all the things that he's hearing now that he didn't know was occurring, or that people disliked him and that they disliked his teaching methods or his whatever, and said that he's been bombarded by a few parents. A lot of kids dropped out of band this semester here, and he's now, after they've quit, didn't know there was an issue, reached out to some of those parents, and he has been hit with a ton of opinions, I guess. And so he was blindsided, which I have felt before with coaching and just in life. And you just think, how many other people think this? Does everyone think this? I didn't know this. How was I supposed to fix it? And now it's too late to fix it. They're gone, you know.
Right.
And this, I mean, just one example that just really sums up a lot of different examples of how things work when you're in a small community, I think.
Right. So what did you, I guess, okay, two things. The whole, we'll talk about you without you is a super annoying thing. I mean, that's just gossip, because I don't understand. And again, like this, we're not going to solve the world's problems here, but we're just going to talk about it and hopefully get some people that maybe are transplants to think differently about how they approach things, first of all, because no matter what, we're not going to change the dynamic of a small town with a couple of talk show episodes, right? Like, I would love it if that were the case.
Maybe.
Well, maybe we will. Maybe we're going to change the world with this. But the whole thing of, that's what gossip is. It's like, it's less focused on actually solving a problem and just bitching about it because you don't like it. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't solve anything. And then there's this poor guy in the middle of it that probably would take your feedback. And I think why do you think people do that? Like, what do you think it is? What's the reason for that? Just like gut feeling. Like, why are people, like, why are they complaining about him instead of just going to him? Like,
well, I mean, there's a sense of, I think everyone can admit this or whatever, but there is some weird sense of gratification, feeling validated with your opinion, whether it be positive or negative. So I was trying to explain to him, I said, try to weather the storm kind of pendulum wise. Eventually it takes a while for change to happen, but people will, come back the other way. But but negativity attracts negativity. I mean, I know this even because I've vented before. I've complained about things before. I try really hard to try to stay open-minded about things and see the other side now, but I mean, that wasn't always the case with me. And I know who to vent to about certain things that I will get the response I want. And it's kind of political in a way too. I mean, how people, they watch the TV network that they know is going to validate what they think. And
well, that's what we all do.
Right. You know, I say they, I mean, it's we, but I mean,
all of us, right.
I've been trying to be a lot more open-minded on, I mean, you talk about stepping out of your comfort zone. Like, this is the way I think. And instead of listening to someone else that thinks the same way, I prefer to try to listen to someone that doesn't, because, you know, maybe it can open my mind up, at least the other side. It might not change my mind, but
right.
You have a little bit of a understanding, I guess.
And that's the hardest part, is that to that point, like, nobody bitches by themselves.
Right.
Because what is the fun of that? Like, it is gratifying to be like, doesn't he suck? I mean, it's just so hard though, because I feel like as we're having this conversation, I'm really thinking about the women that might be watching this. And I'm guessing, well, I mean, there are both sides, right? Like, I would be a community member in this situation where I would have a choice to make about how I want to deal with my feelings about this transplant teacher, right? But I think we're also going to be having a lot of women that are the transplant. And so I think the encouragement goes both ways when it comes to, like, how do we get better at this? Because that's ultimately all I want, is what are some ways that we can be better? Because honestly, as a small town of 1,300 people, you can't afford to just rely on people that grew up there moving back there to sustain the future of your
putting ads in the paper for people to breed with your women. I mean, if that's the case.
As creepy as that sounds, that's squash it. That's the mentality though. Like, that is the mentality. And it's not that it's an overt, like, this is what we think. It's not blatant, but I hope that having this discussion, it helps everybody think about it. Like, that is what you're basically saying. If you're going to squash every new person, if you're going to be completely unwelcoming to every new person, that means you're 100% just saying, like, okay, so let's look back at all the alumni. Who haven't we picked off to move back here yet? They're not all going to come back, right? I came back, but we don't all come back.
I do think that, go ahead.
No, you're fine. Yeah, you're fine. Go.
I mean, I'm beginning to, like, teeter-totter into being I mean, I'll still be transplant material. I mean, but being that transplant and semi being, I think, known, you know, in our small community and everything. And that is, it's an interesting position because I relate to these new people. But I also have very much lemming into the, I'm on this other side. So, I mean, change comes too. And it's like, who are you, you know, to say that? But, I mean, that's like an initial reaction, but it really does, to be that new person. And I mean, my mother-in-law was my only friend for years when my kids were small, and I had no reason to be out of the house, and I wasn't in a job. So I wasn't making friends. And I mean, I went to her house every day and had coffee, and, was the only person I could, you know, talk to and visit with. But it's interesting being in the position I am and relating back to that, and try to keep an open mind to these new people, because they do have new ideas, and it's not because they think your way sucks.
Right.
Just have a different perspective. And if we all could, I mean, it's kind of in our world today anyway, but not get so offended with everything that happens. Like, it's not personal. It's not all supposed to jab you in the heart with a dagger.
Right. So many things. Okay. One of the things you just talked about that we kind of identified, like, when you start a new job, you have a learning curve, right? And sometimes that learning curve is really steep. Like, there's so much to learn, and you know it's going to be a year before you have any confidence, right? Sometimes the learning curve is really short and you got it down in a month. Well, we kind of liken this to an acceptance curve in a small town. So when you think about trying to quicken that curve or shorten that duration for somebody, what are some things you think people can do? Because earlier you said like you were telling him some things he could do, but they weren't necessarily things you would do. So what did you tell him? And then for you, because you
told him to pay us all $100.
Well, I mean, clearly, like if you got the cash, use it, dude. Come on, pay your way to people's good graces. What's so hard about this?
Right. So you want, I mean, what I told him?
Yeah, I do.
What
I
I
want to
would
hear
do.
what you told him, and then I want to hear what you really mean. And then maybe he'll catch this, and he'll be like, "Oh, why didn't she just say that?"
Well, it's just one of those situations of easier said than done things. I mean, how many times do we give advice that isn't how we actually dealt with it, but in hindsight, what we wish we would have done, you know?
It's like my whole world. And I always say, like, I'm not a guru. I'm still working on it. This is good advice, or like a good thing to try, but
I'm pretty sure this will work.
I'm no shining beacon of example here. Like, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and anyway, I related the experience to me coaching here before I knew people, and now coaching friends, kids, and I mean how that is a whole different day of subject. But just explained that I think he needed to weather the storm, and maybe, I don't know. I mean, what I feel like my advice to him was doesn't exactly align with the things we want to do, or even like how, you know, talking with you, like as far as stepping out of your comfort zone and you know, doing things. But you kind of have to earn your keep. It's like being a freshman compared to a senior and having that seniority a bit, as sucky as that sounds. And it maybe works for some people to go in guns blazing and rework the town. But for me and my understanding of the communities I've been involved in, I think you kind of have to pay your dues for a while. And maybe I had said like play in the shadows a little bit and get people to know you, trust you, respect you, and then you can start bringing out those new thoughts and ideas, because people now know that you're not just here to get them, and you know, here to think your town and things like that. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I didn't follow that advice. I guess it just is harder when you don't know there's a light at the end of the tunnel compared to a person that now has went through that to say like, actually there is, and it'll be fine. And you do just have to weather the storm and just push through and keep the people that are going to be on your side for now. And eventually others will kind of fall in line too. It's the change that shocks everybody.
Right. So a couple things as you're talking about this, that's I think particularly challenging for this friend that was talking to you. He's a teacher, right? So you come in and he's not necessarily changing anything up, except he's a different person with a different teaching style. Like he can't actually 100% help it that he's a completely different human than who occupied his position before him. Right? Like, I don't know how much he's changing, and I don't know how wild and crazy it is, but that's just change that's hard, period. So he does have to just kind of wait it out. You know, as long as I would say there's more overall good things going for him than bad, eventually people will come around and they'll start to understand what he's like, as long as he can maintain like some level of openness and honesty with people, right? But I'm thinking about people like you had said that your mother-in-law was one of your only people, right? Like, and you had kids, and yet kids are one of those things that does allow us to make connections with other people. Wouldn't you agree? In a small town, like when your kids get into school and suddenly they're in activities, there's like wrestling moms or basketball moms or that kind of thing. What about people that like don't have kids or don't have a job that's super obvious and prominent? Like what do you think? And again, like, I'm not saying this to you, like you're a guru and I'm a guru, but just like, how does the average person get to be known in their community? Like, what are things that you think they should do? Especially if they don't have kids, to kind of unify them to a group of people. Cause I've talked to a few women like that, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know. You don't even know.
I honestly don't know. I don't know.
I think, you know, when I think about it, I think of all the things in Oaks and probably Sundance too that people could get involved in. I think the equivalent of hanging back in the shadows that you had said earlier, I feel like it's just learning what the organization's really about
before you start saying like, I think we should change this, you know, like basically holding off, like you said, on all the big
Bite your tongue a little bit.
Right. Just sit back and learn, because people still need a way to get to know who you are. Cause like you said, it's all about relationships, and it's hard to trust somebody when the first thing they say is that I want to change what you're doing, because people do get defensive about it. Right. So I think it's also about the way that we all approach the things that we're trying to change. Like, take a step back, think about all the heart, the blood, sweat, and tears that went into whatever you're considering changing, you know, and recognizing that people don't appreciate that. So it's not that you can't ever change anything. It's just not going to be something, like you said, you think there might be people that go into small towns to just like change everything up. I don't know any of those people. I don't know anybody that's been effective for them.
I don't know either. I'm just assuming there's people out there that aren't like me.
Well, I mean, you and I are very different, but I know that anytime I've ever gotten real resistance is because I'm coming in hot, like cool.
I think that is, but yeah, a lot of scenarios.
Yeah. And I'd said to you before we started recording that it's hard because even me coming back, and let's say we're talking about something, like I'm on a board, and I'll just look at them like, but I have actual real life experience outside of Oaks that could support this. And then you just get pissy about it. Like, listen to me because I'm smart. But it doesn't, we don't lead with, relationships are not built based on your expertise or your experience or how smart and knowledgeable you are. It's about whether or not they trust you. And trust takes time.
Yes, agreed.
No matter what. It takes a lot of time sometimes. I mean, you now said that you feel like you're transitioning out of transplant mode somewhat. This is your 16th year. I mean, right? Yes. Thank you very much. Yes. So I think it's just recognizing that sometimes it takes a long time. What I also love is that now you're in this place where you get to be a bridge. We talked about that.
Yes. Be the bridge.
Be the bridge. Like, you get to be this person for him to give him the hope that it does get better and that you experienced it too. Mm-hmm. All of us have an opportunity to do that for the newcomers to our communities, to say, oh, I've so been there, you know?
I mean, and you really truly can, you know, like, I mean, they say smile at someone, it could just make their day. I mean, if you're open-minded enough to be the bridge to these new people, even if you don't know them yet, I mean, give them the benefit of the doubt or, you know, whatever, you truly could change their path in your community. I mean, or keep them there compared to leaving, or, something like that. I don't know.
Right. Be the bridge, man.
Be it.
All right. Can you think of anything else to add to this topic of conversation? Final thoughts for the viewers, Missy?
I didn't practice a one-liner.
I should have prepped you better.
I told you I wanted to know what to say.
Squashing it. You squashing it?
Oh, negativity. I mean, to backtrack to the whole gossip thing.
Yeah.
We all do that. I think, I mean, basically at some point or another, but the speaking directly to the person, being in a coaching role and being a new person too, it just is so important. And I try to do that now too. And you realize you really don't meet as much resistance as you think you would being confrontational, which I totally don't like being. Right. But otherwise, the person that you waited so long to confront about things has to now think, so for 3 months when you saw me, you were pissed. I mean, you were annoyed with me, or I, drove you crazy, and how then like embarrassing and hurtful that feels to know that you felt these feelings for so long. And so, and that said, that's a great way to end kind of this whole conversation and give us one final important thing to take away. And it's that if something is bothering you enough that you would go to somebody else uninvolved and bitch to them about it, then it's important enough to take to the person that could maybe solve it, because they deserve to know. Right. You really have to ask yourself if you're being upset about something is you wanting to change it or have it improve, or if you're just being upset to be upset. Because the only reason we don't confront people is then it might actually change, or you might actually have to, oh, well, okay, fine, you can fix it. I mean, what's the, if that's depressing to hear, then you weren't actually looking for change anyway. You're just looking to complain. And just ask yourself those questions, I think, before you end up being negative about a person. Is, do you actually want them to be better or to do things differently, or are you just wanting to be grouchy?
Right. I feel like, generally speaking, we are on either side of a line, and it's, are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? Like, and you can't really be, obviously we all play a part in the whole thing, but it's about your orientation. Like, do you want to stay problem fixated or solution fixated? Right. And you probably can't solve the problem without including this person who you're so jacked up about that you're running around talking about him, right? So that's I think, just a good reminder for all of us in small communities, because it's so easy to just fall into complaining about it because it's easier.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I do it. I try not to, but I do it.
I know, but we all do.
Yep.
Thanks, Miss.
You're welcome.
Happy transplanting.
Thanks.